Welcome to episode 80 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy features conversations in Canadian theatre with artists of all stripes, from actor to director to playwright and more. If you want to drop me a line, I'd love to hear from you. You can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. We're in the midst of Fringe festival season, and as I record this, festivals in London, Ottawa, and Montreal are in full swing, and we're heading towards the Toronto Fringe Festival. In the coming weeks, I'll be sharing interviews with Fringe artists from all over, and you may have already heard my interviews with Maureen Gauthier and Caitlin and Sean from Sex T-Rex, but if you haven't, I highly recommend going back and listening to them. You can find them and all past episodes of Stageworthy on Apple Podcasts, Google Music, or whatever podcast app you use. My guests today are Tanisha Taitt and Stephen Elliott Jackson, the director and playwright, respectively, of The Seat Next to the King, the winner of the 2017 Toronto Fringe Festival New Play Contest. Are you guys in rehearsal already?
Yes.
Yeah? How long have you been rehearsing?
We've had 3 so far.
Okay. So just really getting started.
Just getting started. Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's good. It's it's good to be compressed like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and The Seat Next to the King, that is that won the playwriting contest. For
yeah, it won the best new play contest at the Toronto Fringe. So
nice.
Out of like 70 plays, it was selected. So.
And that gives you a spot in the Fringe, so you don't have to go through that whole lottery thing.
Which is good because I'm really bad at the lottery, so so I just have to write a really good play, and I get in.
No pressure, because everybody else just like decide what they're going to do if they get in. I think most people are bad at the lottery.
I mean, it is 700 entries in the 16 category.
The thing about the lottery is that most people who apply don't even have a play.
I know. That is one thing that's always annoyed me.
Yeah.
Just I always feel like there should be like 2 categories. People who don't have a play yet. People who do. Those of you who do, great. Send us your script. Oh, you've got a script? Good. You can stay in this lottery. Something like that.
Well, and you can tell when people are writing the descriptions in the book that they're not quite sure they do have something going on. And I love reading the descriptions because it's like, I'm not sure they have something yet.
The descriptions are always fun because you can tell the people who like know what they've got.
Yeah.
And the people who are like, I don't know, I just need to write a thing. Yeah. Just a couple of sentences. That's all I really need.
So painful.
Very much so.
Did you guys know each other before this project?
No.
Okay.
No, actually, I was on the jury for the new play contest, and I had to read a whole swath of plays. And when I read Stephen's, which was on our final short list of about 16, I just really loved it, and it was the only play that when I read it, I was still thinking about it a few days after. And so when we had our final jury meeting and Stephen's play won, his was the only play that all of the juries had ranked in their top 3.
Okay.
I had ranked it first. And a couple days after, I was just thinking, I really love this play. Like, I don't just want to be a juror, I want to be involved in this play. Yeah. And so I called my friend Lucy, who's the GM of the Fringe, and I said, Lucy, I've been thinking about this play that won, and I think I want to direct it. Can you give me Stephen's phone number or his email address or something? Because I want to talk to him. And she's like, sure, like, go ahead. And so I got in touch with him. I told him that I loved the play. And then we just agreed to have a meeting. And we met and got along really well. And at the time of the meeting, I still didn't know if he was going to let me do it, though. I was just pitching.
Is the jury selection process that blind? You don't know who the author is? You don't know?
You have no clue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess you only find out when, like, they announced who won.
You only find out when you pick the name of the play that's won. They say, okay, this play is by Stephen Elliott Jackson.
Nice. Yeah. That's good. And how often, like, how many plays have you directed before?
I've directed 23 23 productions of 17 plays. So there have been some remounts in there.
That's an impressive number. That's
a lot.
Good. I'd love to talk to you about the work that you've done previous to this. Like, is there, like, if somebody says, what's a play that your favorite play that you've directed? Can you name one? Or I mean, there's like 23 productions. That's a difficult, like 17 plays. It's a difficult thing to do. But I'm just curious, like, which one would be your calling card?
My calling card. Holy, that's hard. No, that really is hard because every play I have such a different and unique experience with.
And some were ones that you've written as well,
and
too.
a couple. Although I've never directed my own plays.
Interesting.
Yeah,
not a bad idea.
I don't think I would do it. I wouldn't direct one of mine.
I would love to at some point. It's just that the first two plays I wrote, being such a neophyte playwright, I just didn't feel that. The first play that I ever wrote, I was in, and I think actually part of playwriting. Sorry, I'm totally digressing from your question.
No, absolutely.
But part of playwriting for me is that being an actor, and I'm an actor, it gives you an opportunity to write roles for yourself that you would love to play when you're not, doing a lot of acting. And, when I'm in something, I have no interest, obviously, in trying to be in it and direct it at the same time. So I've always hired directors that I think would serve the piece well.
Is there a play that you can think of that's like, if somebody says, which one is your calling card? Is there one? Or if there's not, that's okay, because they're so diverse that it'd be hard to name one.
I honestly need to think about that more.
Sure,
I directed a play a few years ago, and the author's name, the playwright's name just flew out of my head, called The White Rose, which I loved. I don't know if you know the story of The White Rose, but
was that the World War?
Yep.
The World War II White Rose?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the World War I White Rose, and it was amazing. It was 5 young Aryan students. No, it was World War II. It was 5 young Aryan students who were very kind of covertly trying to topple the Third Reich by printing and spreading pamphlets about what Hitler was up to. And they were doing it very much on the down low. And they were caught, and they were all guillotined. And it was 4 men and 1 woman named Sophie Scholl.
Oh, I've heard Sophie Scholl, yeah.
And she was just this incredible, fierce woman who was given the opportunity to be released, and she refused to be relieved, and she stayed and died with her brother. It was... that was a really, really powerful and beautiful show to do. And I think it was probably the most challenging show that I'd done up until that point. And just kind of the furthest removed from what I had done up until that point.
Is there a particular, like, what was the most challenging about that?
It was the first show that I had done centered around real people. So whenever you're telling a historical story, there's so much... You just feel such a sense of obligation to get it right. And I think it was the play that I did that had the most people that were unlike me, because I had to go and hire a cast of like 7 very Aryan-looking men. And that was really interesting. It ended up being like one of the sweetest casts I've ever worked with. But yeah, I think knowing that there were people that were alive still that knew Sophie's story... definitely made me feel a sense of pressure to not screw it up.
Yeah. In terms of this play, The Seat Next to the King, where does the title come from, and what's the play about?
Well, it's interesting with the title, because it actually came to me almost before I finished the play. All of a sudden, this title had popped in my head. The play is about, it's set in 1964, it's about a white man who walks into a public washroom in a Washington, D.C. park, and the next man who happens to come in is a black man, and they're both there looking for sex. And so when I first had come up with the idea of it, it was actually, I knew about Bayard Rustin for years. I remember watching a documentary and learning about him and going, wow, why do I not know more about this man? And I just kind of kept searching, and he was the easier one to find. But then all of a sudden, the white gentleman, whose name is Walter Jenkins, was someone who totally escaped me. And I'd actually only ran across him either it was, I think it was like an Advocate article where they talked about these gay scandals in politics. And I ran across and I went, how fascinating that the two most powerful men in America in 1964, Martin Luther King and President Johnson, had either gay or questioning men right next to them the entire way. And so, and not in just like small roles, like they're big
like
roles.
big advisory roles.
And for Walter, I mean, no one really knew about him too much, but until he got caught in a washroom scandal himself. But Bayard, everyone knew, and he just kind of kept being pushed back. And so when I thought about the concept of this play, I thought, I talked to the actors and stuff and said one of the ideas I remember thinking about was meeting in the White House. Oh, that'd be kind of fun. But the problem with being in the White House is that they have the conversation they need to have. Where are they going to have this? This is a building that's probably wired. Like, I mean, we learned that from Nixon later about all the recordings and such. But to have them actually meet in a place where they had this commonality, because they both had been caught in scandals of some sort, involved in the washroom and illicit sex and such like that. So they both had this experience, and it was a very shared experience, despite the fact that they're two different people. So yeah,
I was really drawn to the fact that Stephen created this really amazing what-if scenario, because finding out that Bayard Rustin had at one point had a washroom scandal, Walter had at one point had a washroom scandal, completely removed from each other, and for Stephen to say, well, what if they were in the washroom together, was just really fascinating to me. And yeah, and I love how beautifully it's written.
And I love what-if scenarios, because I'm always thinking about that. Like, I love when you read a history book and they talk about another character, and you read another history book and they talk about the same character, and you read another one and they talk about that same character, and you go, but that character is so unknown to most people. Another play I'm thinking about doing that is just centered around that. I read 3 different history books talking about the same person in each of the books, and going, why do I not know this person? And so I love the idea of bringing out characters who we don't know, and I think we should know. Walter probably a little less so, just because, I mean, while he had a position of power in some degree, being next to Johnson, that's kind of a different story. But Bayard is someone we should know. Yeah, like we should. There's no reason why we shouldn't know who he is.
Yeah, I mean, he organized many of the rallies. He gave MLK places to speak. He kind of controlled his agenda, and yet he's for the most part unknown. And
he inspired the whole idea of nonviolent confrontation in. He was doing it like 20 years before Martin Luther King was doing it. But the problem with Bayard was, besides the fact of being gay himself, the other problem was that he got caught almost in between political movements, I would say. You have we have this strong late 50s, 60s civil rights movement going on, but the World War II era, we don't have the same, because people are so focused on the war. They weren't there. But then before that, you have like Du Bois and all that. So he got caught in this like in-between place. And he was also, the idea that he was very centered on the peace movement as part of the civil rights movement was something that was a little hard for people to kind of grasp on.
You mean in terms of like general peace, in the way that Martin Luther King's message shifted over time to include like pulling out of the Vietnam War?
Bayard was very much involved in the Vietnam conflict and stuff like that, and trying to find a way of getting out of that sort of thing. But it was such a volatile period of time. I mean, we have no concept of, I don't think, of how volatile it was.
I mean, it was incredibly volatile, and because of just the horror of what people were experiencing, the idea of committing to kind of what people saw as being passivity, as opposed to just to peacefulness, was really difficult. And so the majority of people, not the majority, but many people before you had the philosophy of nonviolence really come to the fore, were much more aligned to the thinking of Malcolm X, which was more like, we've got to take ours, and no matter what we have to do it. And so the idea of trying to pursue the same ends with no violence, when so much violence was being perpetrated, was a very hard thing for people to wrap their heads around.
Well, and the sheer threat of, like, when your major leaders of your movement are being assassinated, one after another, like it. The fear and you can't. In my world, I can't imagine it. I just can't imagine what. And Bayard kind of stuck his nose in there as much as he could, but problem is sexuality was always a hindrance in that fact. Unfortunately, it's a fact. Yeah.
Was Baird out, or was he as out as you could be at that time?
That's, I think, the phrase. I think your way he is out as you could be. Mm-hmm. I think that's the phrase, because I mean we have to remember that when he was doing all this, everyone knew he was. The FBI knew. Everyone knew, but it was still considered an illness. It was still considered an offense in every state. It was still considered something you could be locked away for. So he was as out as I think he could have been without it, without actually saying, I'm gay, and that's what I am. But, right. He did later. Obviously, he, when that movement moved along to kind of sort of catch up to where we're going, then he could say that type thing much easier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a certain, you were talking just a little while ago about the responsibility of telling stories that involve real people. Mm-hmm. And here you have two real people who are... there's living memory of both of them. Maybe they're not well known, but there is living memory. Mm-hmm. Is there a responsibility that either of you feel in telling this particular imaginary story?
Every second of writing it. Every second of writing it, because, it's for me. It's like, here I'm writing two characters who, Baird especially was a challenge for me, because I had to really think about how are people going to see this. I'm not black. Mm-hmm.
No,
really, I'm not black, and so therefore I'm writing a character who is so predominant in that movement, and it's like, but I think what it is for a writer who it's I remember telling Tanisha this very early on. It's bridging gaps, bridging like the border, like bridging all those things, and that's what I loved about writing this piece, because it gave me a chance to really learn and hopefully get a better understanding of these characters. And for Walter, it was a chance to kind of I'm a big fan of those films from the 1960s. Any of the films have gay themes in them, because they couldn't say anything about. They couldn't say the words, but they had to tell a story without saying the words. Mm-hmm. And for Walter, it was so nice to kind of give a character like that, who, if he'd been in that time period, couldn't have never expressed those words. Right. It was nice to give him those words and give him a chance to actually speak for himself. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I love the combination of us and this play for a lot of reasons. I'm not gay. Stephen is. Stephen's not black. I am. Mm-hmm. So we had the in. Of one of us having the orientation, one of us having the race. It's also a story of two men trying to figure out what it is to be men in a time when the definition of men is very limited.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I loved the idea of bringing a woman to the table and not injecting more male energy into the telling of the story. No, I really did.
No.
I really did.
And I remember mentioning, like, the first time I met, I said, the reason, yes, you are a young black woman, but I'm not choosing an essay because you're black. I'm choosing you because you have an experience that I will never have.
Right.
That you will have, once every 20 minutes, maybe every half hour? I'll give you an hour just in case you're on the subway. But she has an experience that I'm not going to have. Mm-hmm. And that's an experience that Baird was going to have. Yeah. And I can write it. I can write to a point. But there's a point where someone like Tanisha, as a director, is going to come in there and find something that a little bit deeper that I will never hit because I won't have the experience.
Mm-hmm. And vice versa. Like, there will be moments when I may have questions about the gay aspect where I'm like, Stephen, I need you for this, right? And we also have two actors, one of whom is gay and one of whom is not, which is so fascinating. No, it's really, really exciting. Mm-hmm. Just to see how it plays out, and to see how those two very different life experiences come together in the telling of the story. Just even so far in 2 days has been exciting.
Well, it's challenging for them and they're learning from each other, which I think is really beautiful. Yeah. So Conor is learning, like, what am I doing that might be, how does someone portray me as being gay? Like, that sort of aspect of it. But for Kwaku, it's a different aspect altogether. Like, they're looking at each other and how to see each other, and how's it to be, like, closed. Like, we live in a day and age, we're very fortunate that we can mostly be open about our sexuality. Mostly. I'm not saying all the time, but we're very lucky in that sense. And so to see another actor learning how to be a closeted man, it can be very challenging too. Yeah. It's quite a connection they're having together.
Yeah, no, they're great together.
That's good. If I can ask, for both of you, because I always like to find out why people chose to do things in the theater.
We are asking the same question.
Well, I mean, we all ask it.
It's the money, of course, right?
Of course, because the elites and the money and the things.
Oh my god, all my money is falling on the floor.
Yeah, we all... I mean, I'm always curious, and we don't often ask each other, like, why did you choose to do this? So I'm curious, whoever wants to go first, like, what is it about the theater that you love? Why did you start doing it? How did you start doing it?
Yeah, you're gonna make me... Okay, I'll go first. Okay. So I didn't grow up on theater, which is fast. I come from a really small community in Manitoba of 100 people. There's no theater in we actually, I remember one day we had a discussion about... it was a Facebook thing about Shakespeare being taught in schools, and you mentioned that it should be taught in drama class. That's where it should be. And I had to say, if you had a drama class, because I didn't have a drama class. I would have to have gone after school forever and get my parents to pick me up every day. It would never have worked. But for me, writing was I started to connect on... I loved writing people's words more than anything else, because often we don't get to hear, like, and especially with history, I love history. Someone asked me once why I'm not a historian, but what I like about theater is that I get to write people's words that wouldn't normally get to speak them sometimes, and to hopefully find those words. And I'm learning that more as I go along. I did do theater in university and such, and the playwriting was really I want to just write characters. I loved writing characters.
When you were in university, were you there for playwriting, or were you...
Sort of both. I stupidly tried to do a double major in film and theater. Never do a double major in film and theater, I've discovered. Because you end up doing, like, 3 film productions and, like, 4 theater productions in the same semester. And it's, like, it's wild. The playwriting was just... I'd written a play when I was in university early on, just for fun. I took a general theater course. I realized just how much I loved it. And I realized I'd gone back and looked at stuff I'd done in high school and realized I liked writing scenes. But I never wrote full-out plays. I just read these little scenes. But I kept reading books and trying to find those stories in between the books. Like, what were the conversations they would have had. So I just love the immediacy of theater. I love the organic nature. You can watch something and see it 2 different ways or 3 different ways each time you go. I love that.
As somebody who didn't grow up with theater, I'm curious about what made you decide to go to university for theater.
I didn't originally. I actually started in music.
Okay.
I know, it's weird. I went through all the fine arts, I swear. I started in music, realized I would hate music if I kept doing music. I went into general studies. I had done a documentary film in high school, and people really loved my documentary, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should go into film. So I went into film. And then I discovered that, well, the only way to do film at university was to actually do more theater, because you had to know all the actors. Which is true. I mean, but then when I went into theater, the theater section, it was just the hands-on approach. It was less about tech, per se. I mean, there is tech in theater, obviously. But there was something about being more hands-on I loved. That I remember one experience I had while I was directing a film, and my camera person was getting mad at me because I wouldn't tell him to start taping. I kept saying, no, I need to talk to the actors first. We need to talk about what's going on in the scene and everything. He said, no, just film it like 15 times. We'll figure it out. I'm like going... And I'm like, okay, that's...
Yeah.
No, it's like... when I'm writing a story or play, it's like I'm with those characters. I'm living with those characters, and they don't leave. Yeah. Like, that's the weird thing when you're writing plays. They don't leave. They're there. And that's what I love with theater, that you're constantly living with them. Once they're filmed and once they're like that, it's recorded, it's done. Yeah. But theater and plays, they can be done so many different ways. I love that.
That's very true. A movie only gets filmed once, and a play can be is performed many times and interpreted many times.
Yeah.
What's your theater story?
So I didn't start in theater either. But I've always been very much an artist. I began writing very young, writing poetry. As a child, I loved to dance. I studied Afro jazz for a little while. And then when I got to university, I began studying broadcasting. I was very interested in studying radio and television. And because I was interested in being like a broadcast journalist. That didn't last long. Although I'm still fascinated with journalism and good journalism versus bad journalism. And then, but music was always my love. So I started singing very young. I started songwriting very young. And I was a singer-songwriter for years and years. From the time I was 14, I was in my room writing songs, and that was my main love. I ended up going to a school called the Harris Institute, and I studied audio engineering and business and music business. And I really was planning to be a recording artist. That was my thing. And then I had some weird experiences with A&R people. And that whole time that I was performing and playing like coffee houses and stuff, I was falling so deeply in love with performance. And I think that theater kind of became a very natural extension of that. It's like when you're an artist, you're always looking for another way to express yourself. And so I was spending years on stages singing songs. And I was like, well, what if I told stories that were longer than 3 or 4 minutes long? Like, you know, because I had loved writing short stories as a kid. So I was like, what if I just, you know, come back to being at a desk writing that has nothing to do with music, just telling stories. And that's kind of how I started playing around with writing plays. And then because I'd been performing on stage and felt really comfortable on stage as a singer, one day I very randomly auditioned for a play. There was like a audition posted in Now or something. And it was the Vagina Monologues. And I showed up to this audition, crashed the audition. People are like, why are you here? And I did the audition and I got it. And that changed the trajectory of my life. Because after I got it, and that play is very much tied to a movement called V-Day, which is an anti-violence against women movement. The year after I joined it as an actor, I took over as producer and ended up doing activist theater for about 8 years. And several plays that were tied to V-Day. And then thought, I should probably study. So then I... But I was torn because I was working full-time at this point. I was a grown-up. And I was like, how am I going to study? And Seneca College, God bless them, had the only continuing education theater program in the country. And I was able to work full-time and go to theater school at night. And,
wow.
Yeah. Program doesn't exist anymore.
Of course not. Of course not. No.
No, it folded about 3 years ago. But it was amazing. And I don't know how I did it. I had energy then. But that was it. So by the time I finished that, I was like, kind of like, okay, theater is... I'm not done with music. I will always make music, but theater is really kind of the course that I think I'm on at this point. And just continued acting, and acting naturally led to directing. And I absolutely love it.
I love how some people know from the beginning that it's what they're going to do, but I'm always fascinated by the people who went in one direction and then suddenly they were going down a different path. Yeah, I love those stories.
Yeah.
What I liked about hearing that was there's a moment where all of a sudden you realize that's what I need to be doing. But it took a while. For me, it was to this contest. I actually came in second 10 years ago in this contest. And that was this moment where I went, oh, someone likes what I wrote. And that was that moment. And that's when I started to write really unabashedly, and just kept writing anything I could write type things. So I like hearing about that moment.
As a fellow history nerd, is there a particular period in history that you gravitate to, or are you just you're hungry for history?
I'm a huge U.S. presidential buff. It's embarrassing actually. So I like, and Theodore Roosevelt is just like the king to me, because I've actually gone on a tour. I went on a tour of his birthplace in New York City, and I sort of took over the tour. What happened was that the tour guide would talk about stuff, and there's 8 Americans on the tour with me, and they would ask a question, and he'd go, "Oh, I don't really know that." And the first one was his kids. And I'm like, and I said to him, I said, "Oh, actually, it's Alice, Theodore Jr., Kermit, Ethel, Archibald, Quentin."
What?
Just like that. And he's like, "Oh, well, thank you very much." Yeah. And then he asked another question, and they didn't know the answer. And I answered the question.
Oh my God.
And by the end of it, they would listen to him, and they would look at me asking the questions, and I'm like, "Oh." I've always been fascinated by U.S. presidents since I was 10. Seriously, my parents bought us the World Book encyclopedias, and the only parts of the World Book Encyclopedia that are in color are the U.S. presidents. And I just fell in love. Mm-hmm. I was really, and then of course you learn the sordid lives of presidents, and that's where I love hearing the stories that you just don't get to hear about. Mm-hmm. And I love going to sites because they'll tell you, like, no matter how long that person was in office, like 30 days, 200 days, 8 years, that president is the best president that ever lived. And I love that. And I love how they gloss over stuff.
Ah!
Like,
yes, yeah.
Have you ever been in Mount Vernon?
I've not.
7 years ago, they finally acknowledged that he had slaves on the Mount Vernon tour.
Did it?
7 years. Not in the 2000s. Horrible. I mean, yeah.
So that tour, they had never brought up the fact that he had slaves?
Nope.
No, it's not pretty.
They would walk through the slave quarter, and I imagine they would just kind of look at this is their barn, and walked up.
That's where the help lived.
Yeah.
But even now, they preface everything with, "But he freed his slaves."
Oh yeah.
But he freed his slaves, and I finally asked, I said, "You mean he intentionally gave freedom to his slaves?" And they said, "Well, no, he died." And I'm like, okay, no. Giving freedom to slaves, it means that there's an intention of realizing this person, he's a human being. I should offer them their freedom. Or I don't know, like, no, he died.
There's interesting things about being Canadian and watching America. And one of the things that I am fascinated by, and sometimes a little jealous of, is their ability to mythologize. And lie to themselves. Canadians are really bad at lying to themselves.
Oh, I would argue that.
Please, I will happily be argued with.
I mean, as we approach Canada 150, we are steeped in lies.
No, that's true. Nope. I stand corrected. Yeah. We're bad at mythologizing.
Yeah, no.
We can lie to ourselves, but we're bad at building like grand lies.
Oh, grandiosity and
those kinds of.
Well, they're so jingoistic, right?
There's Sir John A. Macdonald never told a lie. Like,
yeah.
Sir John A. was a drunk,
and we know it,
and everybody knows about it. My favorite John A. story is like he was drunk and doing a debate. It's his turn to talk. He leans over the podium and throws up on the floor, and his response is, "Ladies and gentlemen, every time I hear my opponent speak, I get sick to my stomach."
He was a master charismatic man, in that sense. I mean, despite all his failings, he was so charismatic. But
we're bad at that kind of like grand mythology.
Yeah. It's probably why we don't have as Canadians, I mean, we have some great playwrights, but history is a huge problem for us. When we're running plays. Like, I don't know what it is. It's really hard.
A lot of times when we try to do history plays, we're very literal. I don't think that because we don't mythologize, we're bad at lying in the story. Like we sort of like follow a little too closely, whereas Americans are like, sure, whatever, free the slaves, or they're like they're a little more flexible as long as it builds that mythology.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean,
yeah.
There's also many sad things about watching America as it is
implode.
The problem is that America imploding affects us directly, because as America implodes, its garbage infects
everyone.
Oh. Yes,
everyone.
Does. It's amazing. We may be connected on a border, but it's affecting every single nation in this world.
You cannot have a country that yields that kind of power implode and not have it affect the planet.
No. That's one of the best arguments for not having a superpower.
Yeah.
Really. But again, we're digressing from.
Yes, we are.
That is my own
because
fault.
of presidential.
Sorry, I have a great Lincoln play with him being gay in it. That I would.
Oh.
It's he slept with a number of guys. Okay, I'm just saying. Anyway,
I'm curious about. Do you have? Are there things about? As we live in Canada, and all, is there Canadian historical things, or are you very much like American presidents as your thing?
No, I actually, the one play I'm working on is a play about the Fenian raids of 1866, and it's something very personal to me because my great-great-grandfather fought in it. And so it's something I'm starting to try to dive into a little more Canadian history and get some better aspect of what makes us. But again, there's so many dark periods that we don't know how to. We don't necessarily hide it per se, but we just don't talk about it in the same right way. It's hard to explain. It's like with the States, they really try to hide things. Like, they really hide the bad things really badly. But with us, you know...
I don't know. I think the States... Okay, so we both have tons of crap to want to hide. I think the knowledge of what is horrible in the States is much more overt than the knowledge of what is horrible in Canada. I mean, I remember my dad, my father moved here in 1967 and said that, he would rather, after having lived here for a couple of years, he would rather have had the blatantness of American racism than the subtlety of Canadian racism.
Because Canadian racism is very, we don't look at it.
Yeah.
Like, American racism is in your face, and Canadians just don't see it.
Yeah.
We just like to... White Canadians like to not... Like, we're very good at ignoring things. Like residential schools, like racism, like direct racism against people of color. That's something we are very good at just not looking at.
Yeah.
So... And, I think that's another thing that we don't tend to acknowledge in our theater. Again, our histories are mostly told by white men. And so the history books talk about the white men. And so we don't... There are stories that we're missing because they just weren't written down. Or they're passed down orally and in other ways, and they don't get to be on stage or on our TVs or whatever.
And because whoever tells stories almost always tells stories that make themselves look best in the stories.
Well, absolutely.
And center themselves in the stories.
Absolutely.
So until you start getting stories that are written from multiple other perspectives, everything is going to be a very skewed version of history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of my favorite historical books is actually an account of the Upper Canada Rebellion, but it is not... It is told through diary excerpts surrounding it. So it's like, instead of like one... Because we have like two perspectives generally in most of the history books. It's like what actual people were thinking at the time about it. And so... Now that we've talked around a lot of topics, the seat next to the can, as you've had your 3 rehearsals so far. You are. Do you know what venue you have?
Theatre Pass Mariah main space.
Awesome, that's a great space.
It is a great space.
That is a great space.
It's not only is it like a wonderful size of space. It doesn't feel massive, but still has quite a number of seats in it. But it's also really close to the Fringe venue too. So there's a lot, and it has a neat personality.
It just has a lot of character. That space. I've always loved that space.
Theatre Pass Mariah is a great
the backspace and the main space are awesome.
If you use them right, if you use the backspace right, you can do amazing things in it.
I know.
And the main space has so much. There's something about it.
It's a lot of grit, a lot of character to it. Yeah.
It's also a great theater company too, I might add. I mean, they're really trying to break down some walls in theater there, and that's one theater.
Well, that's what their name means.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
That works out well.
Yeah, but I mean, it is. It's like compared to other theaters in the city who are trying.
Yeah,
they are doing it.
And you're right. I was thinking this year it is like because of the new Fringe venue. It is like. It's the closest of the venues to that, which is
3
really
blocks.
great.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's a really great flyering location. I mean, you can just sit just right down there, and then back here for a beer, you guys.
Or I worked the ticket booth, and there's always that couple who comes in and goes, "What's playing close by? 15 minutes from now." I'm like, Theatre Pass Mariah.
Yeah.
So it's good for that.
Yeah, but on the set space, it was whatever was at the annex.
In the Randolph,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different to see it move. I'm really interested in seeing how the hub works in this new space.
I'm really interested too because we fall into patterns. There was a certain pattern that we followed at Transac when it was there.
I remember Transac. Remember the dance parties at Transac?
Yeah. And
they
then,
were
of course,
so great.
Everybody outside, and then at 11 o'clock, everybody out of the inside. Come on, you gotta go inside. It's residential. And then they would move over to Ed's. And the vibe changes, and I remember something happened in the first year when they started like moving like a van with like baffles on it and like closed in like the area for drinking because we were too loud for the residential around there. So like every area changes. I think this is their biggest one this year. I think.
Yeah, the space that they've allotted to to the tent is huge.
Was that parking kind of lot-ish
There's
area?
the whole,
and then there's
that tennis
rink
court thing. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
This is the first year, at least I think that they're doing this. I'd heard that they have like an artist area.
Oh.
I'd heard that was something they were going to do, which is, I think, something that a number of other fringes have done. Montreal had, at their fringe office, they had, drop in. They actually had, like, people, you could walk in and the artists, they had coffee, snacks, and places to sit. Some people would sleep. Some people would do their flyering and, like, get stuff ready.
I love the idea of having artists from the shows just kind of hang out and be available to talk to people.
I love that idea.
Oh, I love that idea.
When you don't have to worry about, like, selling your show to people, because that's always the problem with the fringe tent is you want to talk to your fellow artists, but you're also concentrating on, like, selling your show. So it's like this strange, like, I want to talk to you, but come to my show. It's like,
exactly. So awkward.
Shake your hand with one hand, hand out your flyer with the other. It's like so awkward. It's great to have, like, this spot where we can just hang out
and just be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Edmonton has had like they call it the green room, but it's like a spot where people can hang out and get ready for their show and then head off to the venue. So it's like, it would be great to see that kind of thing happening here.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Is there something that you're particularly looking forward to about Fringe this year?
I'm just excited to be back at Fringe. I haven't done Fringe since 2010. I did it in 8, 9, and 10, and then back in 17. So to actually be part of it as opposed to just an audience member is going to be fun. It's an energy that I've been away from for a while.
I think for me, what it is like, as an artist, you're constantly like renting a venue, you're doing your own thing, right? And this thing, it's everything's kind of set up for me right now for us to have this show, and that the potential of an audience coming into the show is, that much different than, let's say, if I just rented like the Red Sandcastle Theatre, I'd get like, I might get 30 people in Mikey. But this actually has a chance, like, of actually being seen by a lot of people, and that's really quite exciting. It's a little scary.
The one thing that I love about Fringe is that, as an independent producer, it's the time when there are people looking for something to see. Like, it's a concentrated 10-day period where there's an audience that just wants to know what they should see, and they're out willing to see it. Whereas at other times, like if you rented the Red Sandcastle Theatre, getting your audience out can be difficult because you have to get them off their couch. Whereas during Fringe, they're hungry.
They're walking
for
around,
something to see.
They're active.
Yeah,
and I'm so excited. I mean, having won the award, I think is a really wonderful thing, because I think that will just there will be a natural curiosity to see what that play is about, and I don't think that they will be disappointed in the play, because I think that it really is a very poignant story. And what I love about it is how simple it is. And sometimes people, they besmirch the word simple. I love simple as opposed to simplistic, which I find is a different thing. But the play is very simple. It's two men who are both kind of dealing with a very innate need that isn't really allowed to be in that time and place, and trying to negotiate it. And that's all it is. And yet there's so much that happens, and there's so much emotion in it, and it's funny, and it's sexy, and it's heartbreaking, and it's all of those things. And and I'm just really happy to be able to spend this time with it.
And for me, I'm just happy to have, a director who's ridiculously passionate about a show like this. I mean, that's when Tanisha emailed me about directing the show, it was just the idea of, wow, this director's really passionate. Like, she cares so much about this piece. And because I remember I told her, I said, I had one person read it beforehand, and it was someone who wasn't very passionate. And I felt that passion for it, but it's nice to have someone who has equal passion for it. And that makes a big difference. And everyone, like our stage manager, our two actors, everyone's really putting everything into this. My partner's putting everything into this too. We're just talking about building part of our set, and it's like everyone's really wanting to make this show, this really simple show, into something that can be quite an experience for people to see. I think it's amazing.
Had you given any thought to directors when you submitted this play, or were you just like, I'll submit it and I'll worry about production when it.
Well, first, it's again, it was, yeah, I feel horrible to say this, but I literally put the play in like 3 days before the entry date came, and because I won like about 10 years previously second place, I looked at it and I said, oh yeah, I had like 9 characters in it. All this, and this piece, I really like this piece. I'm just gonna put it in, and because I don't have any illusions to that this is the great piece that's going to unite the nation type of thing. It was just. I remember writing it and going, this is very simple. It's outside of my boundary a little bit, and I loved it. And I loved doing it. And I remember writing it in 4 days. Like, there were like, it came so easily. Like, sometimes you write a piece and it gets to be a struggle. This was never a struggle. It was just a very, again, simple piece, 2 men just facing something together. And I think, that simplicity of that scenario, but the depth that you can get into those characters. I remember just knowing, I think this is the piece I should enter. This is the piece I should enter. But I had no illusions that I was going to be. You never know. There's 70 plays in this contest, and there's some great writers out in this. We have some great playwrights in this city right now. Like, it's incredible, and you don't know who's going to be in that contest. So you just you hope.
As far as winning that particular, like, the best play, you're up there with some great playwrights like Kat Sandler and Ince Choi. There's been some success that comes out of that particular award.
Well, and I'm not, I had the great fortune of seeing kind of from the observing perspective that with Ince Choi, because I was actually stage managing a show at the Randolph Theater at the same time. And watching these crowds lining up the door and going, well, we're not going to get the patron spec, blah, blah, blah. but no, exactly. But what I did remember seeing was I saw an audience who was so hungry for a show that they could relate to. And I said that, I went, you are a smart man. You are a very smart man. You found something. You found something. And it doesn't happen all the time, know. And I don't want to make any illusions that, that's, movies and Broadway and all that sort of stuff. That's not what it is. It's it's being able to put a play out that people can really fall in love with and understand and just feel something by the end of the night. That's what I want. I want them to feel something. I just want them to feel something by the end of the night.
My goal with directing always is to try and nurture empathy. And so if there is someone in that room who might have, not even overtly homophobic tendencies, but might just not be as open to the reality of the breadth of people that exist. If they can leave a little bit more open, then to me, I've done my job.
Well, that's a great note to finish on. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.